The theater lights dimmed, and the crowd slowly fell silent as a thin teenage boy stepped onto the massive stage holding a battered old guitar. His shoes were worn out, his shirt slightly too big for him, and his trembling hands revealed a fear he could barely hide. The judges exchanged uncertain glances. No one expected much from the quiet boy standing under the spotlight. But then he whispered into the microphone, "This song is for my mother, the only person who never stopped believing in me." The audience grew still, and seconds later, the first haunting chords of Hotel California echoed through the hall, changing everything forever. His name was Daniel Reyes, a 16-year-old boy from a poor fishing village near the coast. Life had never been kind to him. His father had disappeared years ago after losing everything to gambling debts, leaving Daniel and his sick mother struggling to survive. Their tiny wooden home leaked whenever it rained, and many nights they survived on little more than rice and soup. But even during the darkest moments, music remained Daniel's only escape. Every evening after helping fishermen at the docks, he would sit outside under a broken street lamp and practice guitar with bleeding fingers until midnight. The old guitar he carried had once belonged to his grandfather. Half the strings had been replaced with cheap wires, and the wood was cracked from years of use. But to Daniel, it was priceless. His grandfather had taught him his first chords before passing away, telling him, "Music speaks when the heart cannot." Daniel never forgot those words. At school, life was no easier. Other students mocked his old clothes and quiet personality. Some laughed whenever he carried the guitar case through the halls. They called him Doc Boy, and told him he would never become anything. Daniel pretended not to care, but every insult cut deep inside him. Still, he refused to stop playing. One afternoon, while walking home in heavy rain, Daniel discovered his mother collapsed on the kitchen floor struggling to breathe. Panic consumed him as neighbors rushed her to a small hospital nearby. The doctor's words shattered him completely. His mother's illness had worsened, and expensive treatment was needed immediately. Daniel stared silently at the floor while the doctor spoke, because he already knew the truth. They had no money. That night, Daniel sat outside the hospital alone with his guitar. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he quietly played Hotel California, the song his mother loved most. A nurse passing by stopped to listen. Soon another nurse joined her. Then a patient rolled closer in a wheelchair. For the first time, Daniel realized something powerful. His music could make people feel less alone. Days later, while helping unload fishing nets at the harbor, Daniel noticed a flyer blowing across the dock. It advertised a national television talent competition in the city. The winner would receive enough prize money to change their life forever. His heart raced. This could save his mother. But reaching the competition was nearly impossible. The city was hundreds of miles away, and Daniel barely had enough money for food. Still, he made a decision. He would try. For weeks, Daniel worked harder than ever before. He cleaned boats before sunrise, carried heavy crates at the market during afternoons, and played guitar on busy street corners at night. Some people ignored him completely, but others stopped to listen. Little by little, coins filled the small jar beside him. Every night he returned home exhausted, yet determined. His mother noticed the pain hidden behind his smile. One evening she gently held his hand and said, "You don't have to carry the world alone, Daniel." He looked away, trying not to cry. "I'm going to fix everything, Mom. I promise." Finally, after weeks of endless work, Daniel gathered enough money for a bus ticket to the city. Before leaving, he kissed his mother goodbye beside her hospital bed. She smiled weakly and placed his grandfather's old guitar pick into his hand. "Sing with your heart," she whispered. The journey to the city was long and terrifying. Towering buildings surrounded him the moment he arrived. He had never seen so many lights, cars, or people before. Everything felt overwhelming. Carrying his guitar tightly against his chest, Daniel walked nervously toward the competition arena. The line outside stretched for blocks. Talented singers from all over the country waited for their chance. Some wore expensive clothes and carried professional instruments. Daniel suddenly felt foolish standing among them. A young contestant nearby laughed quietly at his cracked guitar. "You really think you can win with that thing?" Daniel lowered his eyes and stayed silent. Hours later, auditions finally began. One by one, contestants entered the massive room and either celebrated or walked out crying. Daniel's hands shook harder with every passing minute. Then his number was called. He stepped onto the stage, blinded by bright lights and surrounded by cameras. Thousands watched from the audience while the judges sat expressionless behind their table. One judge asked, "What makes you different from everyone else here?" Daniel swallowed hard. "I don't know if I'm different. I just know this song kept me alive. The room fell silent. He closed his eyes and began to play. The opening notes of Hotel California floated gently through the theater. At first, his voice trembled with fear. But then something changed. Every memory of struggle, pain, loneliness, and hope poured into the lyrics. His raw emotion filled every corner of the room. The audience stopped moving. One judge slowly leaned forward. Another wiped tears from her eyes. Daniel sang not like someone chasing fame, but like someone fighting for the person he loved most in the world. As the chorus arrived, his voice rose with heartbreaking power. Years of pain echoed through every note. The crowd became completely still, hanging on to every word. Then the impossible happened. People began crying openly. A camera operator lowered his camera for a moment just to wipe his face. Audience members held their hands over their mouths. One judge stared at Daniel with tears streaming down her cheeks. By the final note, the entire theater exploded into applause so loud it shook the stage itself. Daniel stood frozen, breathing heavily, unable to understand what was happening. Then all four judges rose to their feet. The crowd followed immediately. A standing ovation thundered through the arena. One judge spoke emotionally. That wasn't just singing. That was pain, hope, love, and courage all at once. Another judge asked softly, "Who were you singing for?" Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "My mother. She's very sick. I just want her to hear me one more time and feel proud." The audience broke down again. Within hours, Daniel's performance spread across the internet. Millions watched the poor boy with the broken guitar who sang straight from the soul. Messages of support poured in from around the world. Donations began arriving for his mother's treatment. Strangers who had never met Daniel suddenly cared deeply about his story. But success did not erase his struggles overnight. As the competition continued week after week, pressure mounted heavily on him. Fame brought cruel critics along with praise. Online comments mocked his appearance and background. Some accused him of using his mother's illness for sympathy. Reading those words shattered him emotionally. One night, overwhelmed by stress, Daniel nearly quit the competition entirely. Sitting alone backstage, he stared at his grandfather's old guitar pick and remembered his mother's words. "Sing with your heart." He realized something important. He could not control what people said about him. But he could control whether he gave up. So he walked back onto the stage stronger than before. Each performance became more powerful than the last. Daniel stopped trying to impress people and simply sang honestly. That honesty connected with millions. Meanwhile, his mother slowly regained strength in the hospital. Nurses often gathered around her room to watch Daniel perform live on television. Every time he appeared on screen, pride shined in her tired eyes. The competition finale finally arrived months later. Millions watched around the country as Daniel stood center stage once again beneath dazzling lights. But this time he looked different. Not richer, not more famous, just stronger. Before performing, he spoke quietly into the microphone. "There were many nights I believed life had forgotten me. But I learned something important. Sometimes pain does not destroy us. Sometimes it teaches us how to fight for others." Then he began singing. The performance was unforgettable. Every emotion he had ever carried poured into the music one final time. By the end, even the judges could barely speak through their tears. When the winner was announced, Daniel covered his face in shock. He had won. The audience erupted as confetti rained from the ceiling. Daniel fell to his knees crying uncontrollably while clutching his guitar. For a moment, he looked like the frightened poor boy who first stepped onto the stage. But now the entire world stood beside him. Days later, Daniel returned home carrying the trophy into his mother's hospital room. The moment she saw him, tears filled her eyes. "You did it," she whispered. "No, Mom," Daniel replied while hugging her tightly. "We did it." Over time, the prize money helped pay for her treatment and rebuild their small home. But Daniel's greatest victory was not fame or money. It was proving that even the most broken voices can still move the world when they sing with truth. Years later, people still remembered the boy who performed Hotel California, with tears in his eyes and pain in his soul. Not because he was perfect. Not because he was famous. But because he reminded everyone listening that strength is not about never suffering. Real strength is continuing to stand, sing, and hope even when life gives you every reason to stop. And somewhere deep in the hearts of millions who watched him that night, Daniel's voice never truly faded away.